France, at its colonial height, controlled over a third of African land. Today, though none of that land are under French ownership, their control is still ever present. In the 1960s, many African nations gained independence from France, or so they thought. Yes, they did get a chance to wave their own flag, establish sovereignty with seats in the UN, and so forth, but they still lacked one central aspect: money. Though France was kind enough to let these colonies finally stand as independent, it still put one clear boundary in place: the CFA franc. If you wanted to engage in trade, you needed to use this French-controlled currency. Yes, on paper, participation was voluntary, but in reality, France gave its prior colonies slim pickings in terms of the options to join the global economy. Take Guinea, the only sub-Saharan French colony that refused the CFA. In 1958, Guinea announced that it will not succumb to French lowballing and will attempt to build its own economy with its own currency, the Guinean franc. And how did France respond? By withdrawing everything. Literally. Doctors, teachers, engineers, all left within a matter of days. And it got worse. The French also wrecked the country's infrastructure. They tore up power lines, demolished plans for sewage pipelines, destroyed agricultural equipment, dismantled toilets, discarded medicine, and even unscrewed light bulbs from government buildings. Yes, that's the extent of the French pettiness for Guinea not joining the CFA. After storming through the door on their way out, France wasn't done exerting influence over the sovereignty-seeking Guinea. France used its influence to block loans and aid that Guinea applied for. Guinea was left in complete isolation. And then introduce Operation Persil. You thought France would just watch and stand by as Guinea started to build its own currency. No, the French decided to make an example out of Guinea. Operation Persil was set to undermine the Guinean economy. The first thing France does? Print millions in counterfeit Guinean francs. France did its best to send the newly found Guinean currency into spiraling inflation. They used the neighboring Ivory Coast and Senegal as gateways to smuggle fake bills into Guinea. Operation Persil was set in motion to collapse the Guinean economy and to destroy trust in the newly founded government and its leaders. So what is the CFA then? It is a French-controlled currency that today 14 West and Central African countries use, and it's one of the biggest scams out there. After the Second World War, France was broke, but it still had a colonial empire to manage. In 1945, it created the CFA franc, supposedly to bring monetary stability to its African colonies. But the real reason? To rebuild the French economy on the back of African resources. By locking its colonies into a shared currency, one fully controlled by Paris, France could guarantee cheap raw materials, secure export markets, and a steady flow of capital from the African territories. It was like having an economic life support system plugged directly into the French Treasury. And that system is still alive today. The CFA franc is a French-controlled currency that all these countries in West and Central Africa are still using. Let's break down the ground rules. Because this isn't just a currency, it's a system of control, one designed to keep African nations dependent on their former colonizer while filling its pockets. Rule 1. The CFA franc is pegged to the euro. That means its value is locked to the European economy. Sounds stable, right? Well, it's stable like handcuffs. You can't devalue your currency to compete in trade. You can't adjust to economic shocks. You're locked in. If the euro strengthens, your exports get more expensive. If the euro crashes, your currency sinks with it. There's no flexibility, no say, no control. You're chained to Europe's fate, even if it hurts your own. Rule 2. Until only a few years ago, CFA countries were required to deposit 50% of their foreign exchange reserves into the French Treasury. That's right, CFA countries were sending half of their money from trade, taxes, and exports to France. France earns interest on that money. The African countries don't. And when they need it back, they have to ask permission from France. In 2020, this rule was technically removed for West Africa. But France still controls the guarantee of convertibility. So while the leash got longer, it didn't come off. Rule 3. These countries can't control their own monetary policy. They can't adjust interest rates. They can't print money when their economies need a boost. Every major monetary decision goes through a regional central bank system, but France sits at the top. If France doesn't like it, it doesn't happen. This isn't a partnership, it's a rigged game. And here's the kicker: 14 countries, over 180 million people, all using a currency they didn't create, they don't control, and they can't fully trust. This isn't really economic cooperation. It's more like colonialism with better PR.